I want to talk about a few of the things that I remember. I remember going to a Peruvian chicken place with my wife and running into a former Marine buddy. He was a cop on duty and took care of this neighborhood. Good guy. I told him about the cops and people in corrections in my family. When I was in the Marines, I was always curious what people did on the civilian side. I knew Marines who were cops, firefighters, EMTs, and teachers. Some led young Marine units in their free time. Some taught veterans how to tell their stories. But almost every one of them tried to help society. I remember filling up at a gas station next to a big white truck. I went to point out to the driver, an older white guy, that his tire was low when I saw he was open carrying. I asked him about it, and it turned out I knew more about his Glock than he did. He said he wasn't super into guns, he just wanted to be safe. He suggested that I open carry. I laughed before I could stop myself, and I told him that I couldn't. I didn't want to get into a discussion about why, but I thought it was kind of obvious. I remember walking to a Boy Scout meeting and taking a shortcut behind a gas station. My troop, mostly white, met in a big fancy church in kind of a nice neighborhood. As I stepped out from the gas station, I saw a police car with a cop inside. He looked at me and started to get out. Just then, my scoutmaster and his family, all white, pulled up and offered me a ride the rest of the way. I looked at the cop, who shrugged his shoulders and got back in the car. And then I got in my scoutmaster's van. I don't know what would have happened that day if my scoutmaster hadn't stopped by. I don't think that cop had any plans to put a bullet in me. But things escalate very quickly when people are under duress. If I had been killed that day, I would have died with a Boy Scout uniform, a Scout handbook, and a few nerdy library books in my backpack. And you probably never would have heard of it. I remember visiting my folks one night when a bunch of drunk white college kids were setting off fireworks nearby. We didn't call the cops. We went over to talk to them. A lot of terrified white people from their party were in their door and on their porch watching us talk in the street. We explained that we had always maintained a nice, quiet neighborhood, that there were kids and elderly here, and that fire and houses don't work together. They agreed not to continue. My dad was understandably pissed, knowing what could have happened if they decided to call the cops. I remember parking in front of my townhouse when I was sharing with a friend when a terrified black mom with her two kids asked me to stand with them for a little while. A guy in a car had been staring at them, but wasn't speaking to them. She didn't call the cops, and neither did I. I went over to talk to him and saw that he had what looked like a .45 in a leather holster in his back seat. I started talking to him. Turns out he was from a country in Africa whose name escapes me now. He said they reminded him of his family, who had all died. After some talking and hugs, he left. I don't call the police. I don't carry. I don't leave the house or so much as mow my lawn without my ID in my pocket. I don't stop in certain towns even if I get a flat tire. I don't walk around in groups of more than 3 siblings, cousins, and black friends. And when I play games online, I immediately mute all of the other players. I don't generally ask for help, even if I really need it. And I don't Uber or Airbnb. These are just a few broad examples of how our national culture, manifest in my life experiences, has influenced my behavior. I don't think that all cops are racist. I don't even like to use the word racist in this context because it is a binary term being used to describe a fuzzy characteristic. I think the cops are human like everyone else. Humans are often completely unaware of their own biases, which may only show up under great duress. The problem we are having right now is not about cops. It is our national culture, rife with racial issues, that manifests itself in the intersection between stressed cops and our most vulnerable populations, our most desperate members. What we are seeing on the news is not new. Only the access to video is new. Without video, It's just someone telling a sad story, the kind you might not have the capacity to empathize with. I'm going to say something no-brainer, and then I'm going to say something somewhat less so. Please bear with me. It is important that men spend time trying to understand the perspective of women. That was number one. Number two. It is also important that women spend time trying to understand the perspective of men. I think society works pretty well for men. That privilege is like blinders that we are not always aware that we have on. Men can be oblivious to things that are obvious to women, because men generally never need to be concerned about them. Most of the movies, games, and books men have ever enjoyed have a male protagonist, and antagonist, and everything else in between. Any women in them are either beautiful and helpless, or hideous and cruel. If a man works hard, he advances appropriately in society. If he does not, then he does not. That seems pretty reasonable. For some men who resist the struggle for equal rights for women, it doesn't feel like fighting to retain their privilege. It feels like fighting to retain a fair system. They may assume that everyone has access to the same opportunities, yet simply fail to use them. It can be hard for men to see things that only negatively impact women. It is even harder for men to imagine what effect those things might have on their notion of self and their career. And it is almost impossible for men to understand what this negativity, on repeat, hammering away at her every hour of every day over a lifetime, would bring in accumulation. But what we can do is try. We can listen. If you are a woman, there are just some things that you have to take for granted. There are things that you have to do, things that you can't do, and ways that people expect you to be, whether or not they are true of you or anyone you associate with. It's difficult for men to see that. Knowing where men are coming from might help communicate with them and get their blinders off so that we can help fix the disparity. Thus, it is not that men shouldn't be trying to understand women, but that men don't know that they don't understand. Because women are in the know, you are in the frustrating position of teaching men, an audience sometimes barely aware or criminally obtuse to the fact that there is a serious problem at all. That is, it is not the job of women to recognize that a man who is other. There's my little thing there. That is, it is not the job of women to be every man's teacher, but rather it is helpful to recognize a man who is otherwise decent and make the effort to help him remove his blinders. I use this same analogy to help me understand what being white might be like. People don't get annoyed if you don't know something. People get annoyed if you are not trying. Sometimes not knowing can look a lot like you're not trying. Right after the Rodney King verdict, one of my white friends was dragged off of a bus by a group of black guys and beaten up. He was pretty shaken. He asked me why. I didn't understand how he couldn't have some idea and didn't have the words to explain it myself. The best I could do was to give him the opportunity to talk about his side. That worked. That almost always works. But some of you, and maybe you don't know, are being assholes. Some of you otherwise reasonable people scream and shout and spew vitriol like you're trying out for a job as an internet troll. Your hostile, salt-the-earth solution to problems like this successfully burns bridges with other assholes, but also with other good people. If you're angry that people didn't talk about these things more until now, it is because this is your normal response to it. I know you. Because I know you, I know that you are good people. Good people should be able to recognize each other. Good people should be able to talk to each other, even people they disagree with. Good people should be able to find common ground. Stomping your foot and saying, I don't want you to be my friend anymore. It's something my 4-year-old would do. And because I love her and want her to be a better person, I tell her nicely that she's being an asshole. I really think you should hear that kind of thing from someone you love. But some of you won't, because you cull your friends list down to people who believe exactly what you believe until there is no one who will speak up and say, I love you, but you're being an asshole. If you are lambasting every cop out there, or in any way support the actions of that fuck that shot up a bunch of cops while they were just doing their job supporting a peaceful protest, you're being an asshole. And if you are lambasting the victims, or refuse to acknowledge that many of them would be alive today if they had the good sense to be born white, you're also being an asshole. I'm telling you this because, other than this issue and issues like this, I think you're a good person and deserve the benefit of the doubt. Because being an asshole can be a temporary state, unless it becomes permanent. In case it isn't clear at this point, I don't hate white people. I hate hypocrisy. Our country has real problems. They cannot be resolved by a simple behavioral modification, a stint in prison, or some sensitivity training. These problems are not cosmetic. They are real, they are deep, and they are old. For problems like this, you cannot expect a positive outcome without talking about it. This is doing it the hard way, but it is also the only way that works, and we all need this to work. So talk, and talk honestly and fairly, even if that person never speaks to you again. Listen to what people have to say, even if it makes you physically ill. Then talk. Don't shout, talk. If you have 3 words to say, swallow 2, then talk. If it makes you grind your teeth until they're coming to the top of your head, keep it together and talk. If you would rather bash their head in with your laptop than type one more polite word to them, I understand. Set your computer down, walk away from it. Get a drink, take a deep breath, give their perspective one more read or one more listen, and try again. Please talk. Our kids, all of our kids, are safer, smarter, and more successful when we all have the same opportunity to succeed or screw up, for our brilliance or stupidity to drive us to success or failure. And our country, our world, is far better for it. I don't need you to agree with my stance on the issues. I need you to care about each other and worry over each other in the way that a community is supposed to. Talk to each other like you love each other, because we are all of us dependent on each other.